What do we want?
Freedom!
What do we want?
Now!
What do we want?
Freedom!
What do we want?
Now!
What do we want?
Freedom!
What do we want?
Now! Justice, no peace. No 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 peace. No peace. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice, no
Let me thank everyone who has responded to this call of conscience. My opening statement very deliberately, and then introduce Reverend Walter Fauntroy. Destruction unfolding in Darfur region of Sudan could potentially be higher. What is happening in Darfur is nothing short of criminal. The acts of violence and destruction are not random or a result of war, but simply put, they are byproducts of ethnic cleansing and a scorched earth policy. Without immediate action, over 350,000 men, women, and children will lose their lives in the next 9 months from starvation and disease. Some 1.1 million people have been driven from their homes. Many lack water, food, and sanitation. 35,000 are already dead. Drinking wells have been poisoned. Villages destroyed by aerial bombardment. The Sudan government incorrectly believes that if it denies the byproducts of genocide, hunger, malnutrition, and epidemic diseases, then they and the governments of the world do not have to address the genocide. Sudan's plan is as evil as Nazi Germany's final solution. Use government-supplied and sponsored militia to drive the people out of their villages and then allow starvation and disease to finish the job. All people of conscience, worldwide, beginning this day, to speak now for those in Darfur whose lives have been undervalued and marginalized. We are calling for demonstrations at Sudanese embassies around the world.
Yes.
And continued demonstrations here in Washington, D.C. and the United Nations in New York City. It required concerted international pressure to end the 20-year civil war in Sudan that took 2 million lives. It will take even greater intensity to end the genocide in Darfur. Mr. President, Secretary of State Colin Powell, General Secretary of the United Nations, Annan, please, while you're in Sudan, call it like it's still enough time to stop another African genocide. But we must act now.
Right now.
That is the end of my statement. And let me now.
And this beloved community of the kind that Dr. King convened in his lifetime, human government, and its so-called Muslim leaders, this gentleman who has served for 20 years in the Congress of the United States, I'm tired of the lies, I'm tired of the deceit, I'm tired of the arrogance and So Joe Madison and I were so outraged at what was going on for 20 years in southern Sudan that 2 years ago we came to this place and chained ourselves to that door.
Yes,
And were arrested. And people of conscience across this nation rose up. And before you knew it, Colin Powell and the U.S. government had appointed John Danforth, Senator John Danforth, to pull the covers off of that lie. Lord, please forgive me. But it also strips people of conscience of every race and every creed and every color in the world, and I want to paraphrase. He said, we face a moral crisis as a civilized people on this planet, and those who act boldly are recognizing right as well as reality. The action that we are about to take here today, this call to action, is like what we did in the 1980s. We appeal to people of goodwill in our nation to take non-violent steps to end the murderous oppression of black South Africans by getting arrested at the South African embassy. And we marched until we changed that situation.
1 million died in the South, 5 million were driven from their homes. The same genocidal tactics are being used in Darfur today. We call on the good people of the world to stand with us, to stand up and say enough is enough. Thank you.
It works. 2 weeks ago, we held a rally led by the Black Ministerial Alliance in Cambridge, Massachusetts, across from Harvard, where Kofi Annan was coming to get an honorary degree. Has thrown 100,000 Shaluks in the South off their land. The truth is that Khartoum has waged a jihad against the Christians and the animists in the South. The truth is they killed 2 million people and enslaved hundreds of thousands of blacks because they were Christians and animists. And the truth is, Kofi and Colin, you have to stand up to the pharaohs of Khartoum and say, set the slaves free.
Yeah. Truth to justice.
Kofi Annan, the United Nations is broken. If you sit there and have Sudan on the Human Rights Commission of the United Nations, you have a broken United Nations. We demand Sudan be evicted from the United Nations today.
Now.
It's time to tell the truth. You have to say in the United Nations the word is abductees. They don't let you say the word slaves. It's not politically correct. It's not diplomatic. Imagine the people around here, are you sons and daughters of abductees? No, we're sons and daughters of slaves. Finally, the world has abandoned you, but we will not. We are the sons and daughters of African slaves and the sons and daughters of American abolitionists. And we have fought for freedom for ourselves, and we will use our power and our energy to reach out to you, to protect you, our brothers and sisters. And I call on the people here today to make this pledge and to stand by us. And if you do, then you can say in the words of Harriet Tubman, I have seen their tears and I have heard their cries, and I'll give every drop of my blood to set them free.
All right.
Yeah.
So we have 3 demands. Today, the American Anti-Slavery Group has joined the call of Walter Fauntroy and Joe Madison, and we declare that every day in Harvard Square there'll be a daily vigil until the genocide stops.
Wow.
We have 3 demands. Sudan cannot be in the United Nations. Sudan must be evicted from the United Nations. You can't have a slaughterer and enslaver of people sit in the United Nations. 2. Kofi Annan, you have to stop begging for access, and you have to make the rescue plan now. 3, we need the United States to send over a slave monitoring team to make sure that all of the slaves in the South, now that there's a ceasefire, are returned to us and set the slaves free. Thank you.
Gathering here for the people of Sudan who have suffered for so long can no longer afford our silence in the face of this new chapter of their tragedy. So loudly, starvation. I stand here today to say we cannot cover our eyes, dare not cover our eyes, in the face of the unabated evil perpetuated against millions of people of black African origin.
Amen.
We dare not harden our hearts and fall victim to inaction, as tens of thousands have been murdered and 1 million forced to flee their homes and farm, hundreds of thousands estimated to die by the end of this year because of the violence and famine if we do not act. We are here to say we will act. We will not allow this to happen. We were different. We waited for others to speak out, but too often there was only silence. A collective conscience in recognition of this terrible affront on all humanity. For only the second time in its history, the Committee of Conscience of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum has issued a genocide alert on behalf of the victims in Sudan.
Thank you.
We must not wait until we begin to take the necessary actions to avert a humanitarian catastrophe. Now, I am joined here today by community relations professionals, leaders of the Jewish community from all across the nation, and by others in the Jewish community. They've come together with the Jewish Council on Public Affairs. The United States insists that the government of Sudan must now immediately end its support for atrocities. Only when the government of Sudan allows full humanitarian access for relief workers, only when Sudanese children can grow up and thrive in peace like these children, only then will we say, in the words of the Passover Seder, Dayenu, it is enough. And until then, we will speak out for those who cannot speak. We will press the UN to condemn and intervene in the horrors in Darfur. We will insist that all people of conscience say, this must end. Until that happens, we continue this struggle, and we will prevail.
Americans of Sudan, and what stands in the way of their prophecy? The church, the Christians of Sudan, the black African people of Sudan, Christian, Muslim, and followers of Nilotic religions have a dream too. The attacks of Marah Halim and Janjaweed who come to kill, steal, and destroy like the agents of the evil one that they are. When they no longer have their villages bombed, their crops destroyed, their homes and their women and children taken away from them. When they are free to worship, free to build, free to be who they are, no one's slave, and to live at peace with their neighbors in the north. For a time, the dream of peace has seemed so real you could taste it. It caused festering sores on the tiny bodies of African children, and brands are burned into the flesh of those taken as slaves. The bodies of men, women, and children are left to rot and stink, but to decay, so Sudanese carry heavy loads on their backs, but sag under the even heavier load of disappointment and despair. And the air explodes with the fire of aerial bombardment and helicopter gunship fire. But there is another prophecy concerning Sudan. It says, at that time, gifts will be brought to the Lord Almighty from a people tall and smooth-skinned, from a people feared far and wide, an aggressive nation of strange speech, whose land is divided by rivers. Sounds like Sudan to me. My dear Sudanese friends, you have been overlooked and ignored by the world while you have endured genocide. The media, the UN, the world turned away while President Omar Bashir killed 2 million. Now that numbers are increasing, they're beginning to take notice. What the world and the media did not know is that a sovereign God has a role for you to play in history. And those who commit genocide against you, and that those who allow it and stand by will be judged. We are here to say to you that we stand with you against this genocide, against slavery. We call upon the Sudanese government of President Omar Bashir to embrace the dream of freedom and peace. We call upon the U.S. government and the world community to act now, to stop slavery and stop genocide in Sudan.
Now!
International urges the Secretary of State, as he is in Sudan, to notify the world that his time has run out for the Khartoum war criminals, and that the United States will work closely with Sudan's oppressed democratic opposition to restore democracy and respect for human rights. That the United States will mobilize international forces to guarantee the safe return of the survivors of ethnic cleansing, and the United States membership of the United Nations should suspend Sudan. He said, finally, I would like to commend the many people of goodwill throughout the country of every race and religion who are not prepared to stand idly by while the lives of their fellow human beings destroyed by the forces of evil.
Less than us. Join us and let us push and move to the justice.
God tolerates evil, but not forever. General Bashir, the tolerant time is over. If Sudan wants these demonstrations to stop, and they will continue, it must end its genocidal campaign of violence, starvation, displacement, and enslavement of black Sudanese. This jihad of racism and religious imperialism and greed must end forever. And so you've heard from all of our speakers with the first rule of law enforcement is nobody should cross the crime scene tape until it is cleansed of its crimes. And so Joe Madison and Reverend Fauntroy will wrap the embassy and the crime scene and declare the crime scene and take an action of civil disobedience.
Stop slavery in Sudan!
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 Slavery in Sudan!
Stop 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 slavery in Sudan! Stop genocide in Darfur! Stop genocide in Darfur! In Darfur! In Darfur! Genocide in Darfur!
Your second of 3 warnings. If you do not leave, you will be
You can't run, you can't hide, Sudan can't do genocide. You can't run, you can't hide, Sudan can't do genocide. You can't run, you can't hide, Sudan can't do genocide. You can't run, you can't hide, Sudan can't do genocide. You can't run, you can't hide, Sudan can't do genocide. You can't run, you can't hide, Sudan can't do genocide. You can't run, you can't hide, Sudan can't do genocide. You can't run, you can't hide,
Sudan can't do genocide!
you can't run, you can't hide. You've been charged with genocide. You can't run, you can't hide. You've been charged with genocide. You can't run, you can't hide. You've been charged with genocide. You can't hide. You can't run, you can't hide. Enough. We jihad 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 enough.
We just
Someday, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. someday. Set the slaves free. Set the slaves free. Set the slaves free. Set the slaves free today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. Stop genocide now. Stop genocide now. Stop genocide now. Today. What are we gonna do about it? Why? What are we gonna do about it, Joe Madison?
No, on the other side.
God bless you, God bless you, God bless you. Stand strong, it won't keep you long. God willing. God fearing brothers. Take the handcuffs of
And that genocide!
that genocide!
Got your back, Joe.